Start this. And here we go. Intro to CSS. So CSS, cascading style sheets, like we talked about yesterday, it's going to be the way that we style our HTML. It's going to be the way that we can change the way that the text looks, maybe add some different types of colors to our web page. It's going to be the way that we can position things on the page in the way that we want. And providing that, if we go back to the human body analogy they gave us, it's the way to have we have the skeleton already, and now we're going to provide a way to make the person look a certain way. And then JavaScript's going to come along and put a brain in the person and allow us to interact with this metaphorical person. Anyway, moving right along. CSS rules. CSS, you define a rule with CSS, and that will dictate which element we want to style, how we want to style it. And here we have an example. We say which element I want to style. I want to style a list item. Remember those items inside of a list, those bullet items? And so I have, my whole rule is this full thing. It has a section for what element we want to style and then how we want to style it. We say, I want the color, the font color of these list items to be blue. So any list item on the page, I want its color to be blue. In this case, right, we see the style take effect here, and it turns our list items blue. What we're about to learn tonight, we're going to learn the syntax for writing these CSS rules. We're going to learn some different ways to choose which elements to change. And we're going to learn about some different style properties that we can change, some different things that we can change to change the rendering of the page. So like I said last night, HTML has some default styling, right? A while ago when people were first coming up with HTML, someone said, you know something, I feel like headers should be big and bold. And if everything looks the same on the page, that's going to get really confusing. And I don't want to make developers have to start from scratch every time. So let's define some default stylings that'll kind of give developers a little bit of a clue of what different HTML elements do what. That they kind of hint at what the content's purpose is, how it breaks down semantically. And then we have CSS, which is all about how you want this thing to look. How can we craft the look of the page? And then you have this thing in the middle called layout, right? Where it kind of takes both. It's a little bit of how the page flows in like a semantic sense, right? Like like think of it like a paper, right? We have these, like a header, which is big and bold. And then we have different sections like paragraphs that are spaced uniquely to themselves. There's things in there that are have to do with the way that it looks, but the way that it looks supports the content. Don't worry too much about this slide. This is kind of like the big philosophical discussion, but this won't impede you from learning the CSS. I just wanted to open it up. Here we go. This is what we're talking about. On the left, we have what a web page will look like with CSS, and then on the right we have without CSS. And this is really to give a little bit of an indicator of why CSS is important. Yeah, it makes a web page look pretty and it makes it look cool, but also it makes it easier for a user to interact with and come on and immediately start to read. If I went on a web page and I needed to like get information, and what I saw was the right here, I'd have to read all of these words, and I'd have to really, like, if I wanted to know one thing on this web page, if I just wanted to look up one piece of data, I'd have to read everything. It would take a while. I would get really frustrated because everything looks the same. Whereas on the left, right, we have clear sections. We have one big section that's like a different background color. We have like a sort of like a that top light blue part there. I instantly know, okay, this is kind of like maybe a menu or like some sort of like title bar. And then I have my paragraphs beneath that. I have at the very bottom in very bold font, we have learn more general knowledge. So if I needed to pick out one piece of information on here, it would be a lot easier for me to just pull this up and find it because it's styled in a certain way, and it's styled in a way that's going to group things together and section things off so that me as the user, I can come on here and instantly put together what the page, what kind of experience the page wants me to have. So that's really the purpose of CSS is to build a better experience for a user and to guide the user towards what types of information they might be looking for and how to find it easier and quicker. So here are kind of our terms. We have these CSS rules. The whole thing is a CSS rule, right? It's broken down into kind of two parts. You have your selector, and we talked a little bit about that yesterday, right? With IDs and with classes, you have this notion that I want to select, I want to find a specific element. And there's attributes that I can use to make that easier for myself. But I can also just say, like in this case, I have an LI in there, right? Where I'm just saying, yeah, any old list item. I don't care about which one. I'm not going to put anything on it to make it more distinct. I just want any list item, right? So that's the selector. It guides us towards which element we want to apply the style to. And then we have what's called a declaration. This is just saying, this is a kind of styling that I want to do, right? This is something that I want to apply to that element that I'm selecting. So I've selected the element and I want to give it a border that is 1 pixel wide and is red. So it's a property and then a value, right? So the declaration is made up of a property and a value. So right below that, you can see I want this list item to have a font style property of italic. So give it an italic font. And that's all this is doing. It's just giving a rule. So apply these to any elements matching this selector. Any questions on that, on just the way that CSS rules are made up?
No.
All right, cool, sweet. All right, moving along to the selectors. All right, so here we go. First of all, we see some pretty familiar things, right? We have a class, we have an ID, we have an href. We have 3 attributes there. The types of selectors that we have to choose from are tags, classes, IDs, attributes, pseudo elements, and pseudo classes. I'd say for this class, you're really only going to have to know about the first 3. Tags are HTML elements. It's the exact same thing as like the way that you would write an HTML element without the greater than or less than symbols. So here we have, right, we can see up at the top there that there is an anchor tag, a link, right? We have a link. So this tag basically says all links, any link, apply the style to. We also have classes, right, which we talked about last night, a certain group of elements with this attribute class. And the way that we write that is by adding this dot before it. Then we have IDs, right, which to review are our way of saying there is one specific element that I want to apply this style to. There's one specific element I want to select. And the way that you write it is by doing this hashtag and then whatever the ID value is. We can also apply styles. We can also select off of other types of attributes. So there's an attribute called type, and you can say anytime that I have an element that has an attribute called type and that has a value of file, apply this style to. Then we have pseudo element and pseudo class. Pseudo element is kind of, man, like they're like fake elements. They don't really exist. They kind of exist in relation to other elements. So this after thing is kind of like the space after an element. Once again, like this is a little bit outside the scope of this class. So don't worry about it. If you're super curious, you can go and Google it, but don't let it get in your way. And then pseudo classes are things like when you hover over an element and it changes color. Sometimes, if you've seen that on the internet, you can apply classes that aren't really there. Once again, this is like a really heady concept that's outside the scope of this class, but just to sort of like give a little I don't know, window into it. That's the way that hovering and changing styling happens. Like when you hover over something and it changes color, we use these things called pseudo classes, specifically this one, hover, in order to facilitate that. Any questions on the selectors?
No.
All right. Okay, cool. Moving right along. Combinators. Combinators, that's a really weird word, but it basically just means you can combine these types of selectors. You don't just have to have one. So what you can do is there are these different ways that you can combine them. Like, let's say that I was like, okay, I want to select all list items that specifically have the class full stack, right? Or if I wanted to say, okay, I want to select all list items and all elements with the class full stack. I could do that. I could combine selectors, and they're called combinators. So we have 4 of them here. If you push them right next to each other and you don't leave any space, that is to say elements with both this thing and this other thing. So in this case, we have a tag and a class. And this would say, give me an element with both this tag and this class. If we include a space, we say, give me any elements with this class that has an ancestor that matches this tag, right? Remember, we had parents, and you can have parents of parents, right? How we had the UL, that UL is a parent of a list item. So any ancestor that matches this tag. If we include a comma in between them, we're saying, give me any element with either this tag or this class. And then finally, the greater than symbol here says, give me any element with this class whose direct parent, not their grandparent, not their great grandparent, direct parent matches this tag. Comments in CSS. We can write comments. Comments are great to write in CSS as well. There's a little bit of a different way of writing them. What we do is we do a slash, an asterisk, and then we write our comment and we close it with an asterisk slash. So it's a slash asterisk. You can write multiple lines. It's just going to keep on going until you close it with an asterisk slash. All right, so that was a lot of information. Any questions on any of that? On the combinators, on the selectors, comments?
No.
On the comments, if
Mhm.
you forget to like close out, is it pretty forgiving where similar to HTML where
No, sir.
it will not assume a spot to close?
No, it'll error and yell at you.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So just for better or for worse, sometimes erring is good because we make mistakes and forget to close things. But yeah, it'll be mad.
I have a question.
For sure.
So the comment in CSS does not show up on your page, just like HTML?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, no worries.
This is Dana. I have a question.
Sure.
So I've taken some coding classes before, but it was so long ago, and yours has been really good.
Sure.
So, but the HTML we learned yesterday, you know how the structure and you do the heading and the paragraph and all that. So this is kind of like to tell it its style. So you'll probably answer that as we move further, but just to make sure, we're going to understand how to incorporate these together, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yes.
Okay. All right. Just want to make sure because I wouldn't know where to put this right now.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks for letting me know. And yeah, we'll make sure that we answer that for you by the end of the class.
All right. Thank
Sure.
you.
Okay. Moving along. So cascading style sheets. That's what CSS stands for. The reason that it's called cascading style sheets is that we can, when we're defining these styles, right? We define them on a file. You pull up a file, you write in your styling rules, and you don't have to have it on one file, right? Let's say that like I have, for whatever reason, I want to break it up into style file number 1, style file number 2, style file number 3. And I'm going to load them into my website. Basically what it means is I'm going to tell my website, hey, here are these files. When you start up, take them and incorporate them into the HTML, right? Like incorporate them into the rendering of the page. And the reason that they're called cascading style sheets is because it loads them one by one. And if you have style rules that would overwrite or are the same as previous rules that you've defined, like let's say I make a rule on list items to make the color green in style file number 1. If I come back in style file number 3, which I've loaded later on, and I say, okay, I actually want to make it red, cascading just means that it's going to overwrite stuff. Whatever's loaded the last is going to be the rule. That's what is going to be applied. So like once again, like don't try not to get too caught up in the details here. It's just a way of saying like these things load in one at a time. Sometimes we have rules that clash, that collide. They call them collisions. And there are some rules that we're going to go through. There's some ways that these things resolve, but the default is that whatever you load last is going to be what is applied. So what are some of these rules? Let's take a look here. We have what I'm talking about. We have a styles B and a styles A. You see up there at the top, index.html. There's this section head, and then we have link style sheet, link style sheet. Here we have B, which is going to get loaded in first, and then A, which is going to get loaded in second. So if we look to the right, just to the right of them, we can see some rules on styles A as well as on styles B. So they both affect list items, right? Styles A tells all of the list items to have a font color of red, whereas styles B gives a font size of 40 pixels. So what I was just saying is that if styles B had tried to make the color green, the color wouldn't be green when it got to the page. Styles A would come along and say, no, 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 I'm getting loaded in after you. Color is going to be red. But here with these two, they actually don't collide, because although they're trying to apply style to the same elements, they're applying different styles. So they can play nice together. They don't have to worry about a collision. So here on the bottom, we can see that color red has been applied, and the 40 pixels has been applied as well. There's one more style that got applied here too. If you look back up at that index.html and you look down to where you see li, you'll see an attribute there called style, and then you'll see background color blue. We can also put style directly on our HTML, like an attribute, right? And you know, the computer will be like, great, okay, this is fine. However, this is usually not good practice, because if I wanted to change, like if I wanted to make some big overhaul, right? Like I wanted to totally rewrite the style for my website, I could just write a new styles file, right? Like that would be an easier way than having to go through and find all of like the style attributes in my HTML. Like the fewer times that you can make yourself have to go through line by line and find something and edit it and change it, like that's what we're going to try to avoid with these best practices. So this is really just an example to show you that like sometimes you might see inline styling like this background color blue, but it's typically not best practice. Okay, so what happens when two rules conflict? What happens when we get a collision? So here are some rules. Here are some, I'm trying to think of rules, another word for rules. Here's some stuff that will help you in figuring out how the computer is going to decide which one to actually apply, right? Like if we look at this example here, we have an HTML element, div. That div has an ID attribute called thing, right? Then we have two CSS rules, one on the left, one on the right. The one on the left is trying to apply a background color with a value of red to all div elements. All div elements give a background color of red. That's the first rule. Second rule is saying this element with an ID of thing gets a background color of blue, right? So here we have on the HTML element, right? We have both things being true. This is a div that has an ID of thing, and it has two rules trying to be forced into it. So which one does it take? Does anybody want to venture a guess as to which one might win out here?
It'd be the
Probably
thing,
div.
wouldn't it?
It would take the first one.
Yeah, it's going to be the ID. It's going to be hashtag thing. It's going to be blue. So this whole set of like which one wins out is based on this thing called specificity, which is which rule is like how specific is your CSS rule, is your selector, right? The one on the left is trying to apply a style to all divs on the page, whereas the one on the right is trying to apply a style to exactly one thing, right? So IDs, because they're trying to select one and only one element, that's more specific than all divs. So this set of rules about which one is going to win out is known as specificity. And the way that you can think about it is like which one of these is more specific, which one of these is affecting a more specific set of elements. So here we have another one. We have a class, right? We have a div, which is, it has a class foo. Rule on the right, all div elements have a background color of red. On the left, div background color of red. And then on the right, all elements that have a class of foo, background color green. Anybody want to try for this one? Which one's going to win out here?
The class will.
Got to vote for class. Any other votes?
Class.
All right. Yeah, it's class. It's more specific, right? It's a certain group of elements that have a specific attribute. Yeah, it's more specific. All right, here we go. We have on the left, we have an ID. And then on the right, we have a combination of classes. How about this one?
Class.
That one is going to be class because it's closed at the end.
That's the second rule.
Got votes for classes?
Mm-mm.
It's
Definitely.
actually the ID, yeah. So if you think about it this way, like any combination of classes is still going to be less specific than one and only one element. An ID selects only one element. If I have like a bunch of different groups that I'm including, that's not as specific. So the ID is going to win out over any combination of classes.
Got it.
Yeah, it's a tricky one. And then finally, this one is like the trickiest. Here we have a couple of rules being applied. We have really three rules. The one on the left is an ID of thing, which has a font size of 30 pixels. And I guess maybe it's supposed to have a background of blue. The one on the right, background green. And the up on the HTML, we can see a style, inline style, background orange. Anybody want to guess blue, orange, or green? What is it?
Blue.
Ooh, we got some disagreement. I got to vote for green. I got to vote for orange. I got to vote for blue. Let's see. It's orange. Yeah,
Okay.
so inline styling is the most specific because it's like it's directly there. I don't know. Inline styling is kind of weird. It's like directly there on the element. This is also why inline styling is bad practice, is because I've done this before where you're trying to change something. You're writing your CSS on your CSS file and you're like, man, why is this not changing. Why won't you change? And then you go look at the HTML and you're like, oh, it's because there's a, a background orange directly applied here. And that's why I've spent the past 2 hours trying to get this thing to work. I'm not bitter about it. It's all part of the job. But that's specificity. And then last, we have a little cartoon about what it's like to be a developer and try to develop CSS here. Yep. Yep, that's about it. Cool. So any questions on CSS, or is there anything that you all would like me to demo? I have an environment up here that